Hello and welcome to the Ask Ezra Podcast. Today's episode will be a departure from the normal format. Previous guest, Master Joshua, returns, but this time the roles are reversed and Joshua is the one asking the questions. This discussion about accountability and integrity was inspired by a response to both real and malicious rumors. In the next episode, we will return to our regular format.
I appreciate the opportunity and the honor of being able to have this conversation with you because it's a pretty significant one. This started from, this idea of having this conversation started from a statement that you wanted to make. And upon further discussion, it was like, why don't people hear it from your words as opposed to a prepared statement, right? To really see who you are, learn who you are through this and your intentions behind this.
Yeah, and it feels late. It feels overdue. And I've been writing this letter for 6 months. And then when I finally got the letter to where I wanted it to be and then recorded it, it just felt like really robotic and really cold. And I brought that to you. And that was one of your pieces of feedback, is that it felt cold. And so I thought, let's have a conversation, right? Let's keep it warm.
Yeah, for sure. And granted, what you made in the statement was solid, and you made sure that you covered all your bases because you have a lot of ground that you want to discuss.
Yeah.
And in the recording, you said it was 3 minutes long on video. So that's a pretty significant statement.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's a whole track. That's a ballad.
That's a love song right there.
Yeah, let's stop beating around the bush. It's a conversation about accountability.
Yeah.
It's a conversation about being in integrity or being in accountability, and what do you do when you're out of it and how do you repair? And I think it's really easy for people in the BDSM community and other communities to think of people as disposable and say, oh, they messed up. Clearly, they are not perfect. We should get rid of them. And that's not how we build a robust community. It's not how people heal. It's not how people grow. So there was a lot of pressure, I think, for me to disappear. And I wanted to disappear for a while. I really wanted to just say, okay, I'm not going to show up anymore. But really, that's not the integrity move, right? The integrity move is doing the work and showing back up and talking about it and doing better, really moving forward, right?
Yeah. I'm lucky enough to be part of your accountability pod, which you created. You reached out and asked for folks from your community nationally to sit and hold space with you, to talk through some transgressions, some things you feel were wrong, and how do I make it right? And we've been on this road now for quite a few months of discussion and meetings and reviewing statements and questions and forms. You've got a really solid approach to wanting to reconcile your relationship with your past behaviors, acknowledging them and acknowledging those with whom you have harmed either knowingly or unknowingly.
Yeah, no, I don't think I ever set out to harm anyone. I think that I can say with confidence. I think that as a sexual sadist, there is some things that can look harmful in sex and whatever, but we're not talking about that, right? And I think maybe that plays into it because people judge, right? People will say, oh, I like a spanking, but not that hard. She must be sick. He must be evil, right?
Yeah.
That happens a lot. And I think it's really tough because there are these kinds of judgments that come up and they've been constant, like day one constant, right? And then the message of, hey, this behavior is not appropriate is lost in the noise, right? Like I've been attacked for being too old, for being too young, for being too fat, for being too straight, for being too gay, for being too dominant, for like literally everything you could think of. I couldn't morph myself into something that people wouldn't attack. And so when those genuine pieces of feedback are given, I didn't hear them. And I think that's what was really hard, is that I wasn't receptive to the messages at first until I kept hearing them, right? Until I was like, wait a minute, here's a pattern. It's not just somebody projecting. this is actually an issue, and let me address that issue, and let me see where I need to grow, because my intention was never to hurt anybody, right? My intention was to support people and to perhaps challenge people. And that's really difficult to do in a space where when people feel uncomfortable, they think that something's wrong, because you can't grow unless you acknowledge an area where you need to grow. And that's an uncomfortable process. Education really necessitates a certain amount of, hey, you should be uncomfortable right now. Right. And we've got this community where if I'm uncomfortable, something's wrong. Right. Instead of here's where I need to grow. Right. But not to excuse any behavior, but it's like the alarm has been going off all the time forever. And then people say, hey, why didn't you respond to the alarm? It's
Yeah,
because it's
yeah.
been a false alarm the whole time. And then there's been some real alarms. Who could tell? Right.
It can get lost in that.
Yeah.
And a lot of it comes in different forms of miscommunication, forms of missed signals. There's a wide reason why. However, at the end of the day, they were missed. And their accountability that plays part in the reconciliation of these relationships or these circumstances.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about accountability.
Yeah. To me, accountability in this context specifically means that my words and my actions match my values and beliefs. Right. And I think accountability is really a condition. It's, are you in accountability or are you out of accountability? No child is born in a state of accountability, right? They're babies. You have to learn it, right? And nobody's going to have a perfect record. But I think where I was out of accountability is when I used humor in tense situations, which has benefited me in the past. But what I didn't realize is that in a position of power, those jokes can really hurt people. Like, you can't expect a mixed group of people to get the sarcasm or to appreciate the irony or to be able to realize that it's a commentary on the society, not an endorsement of the society.
Yeah. And through those experiences came the awarenesses, right? We spoke about it. I actually remember making a phone call to you around that time to check in, because my position on situations like these is always to speak to everyone. And I wanted to hear what happened. And you were in accountability then. We sat down, and after we caught up, it was like, let's talk about this. And you were already feeling that shift in your perspective, right? Of, I've been called out. Now what do I do?
Yeah. I think sometimes there were mistakes that took me a long time to figure out were mistakes. But other times, as soon as these words leave my mouth, I go, that really wasn't the thing to do. I am guilty of poor judgment on occasion.
Because we actually spoke about that, about your relationship with humor, where you're from, culture, and then the state of the union today, right? And there was a time and a place for those, and then there's no longer a time and a place for those within majority of the context, right? So let me ask you. So humor is one time of being out of accountability. Tell me more about being out of accountability. What does that look like?
Yeah. I think what is out of accountability has to do with your values. And I think I value growth. I value honesty. I value forwardness. I value peace. I value justice, and I value equanimity, right? And so I think that at times my silence was out of accountability, right? At times I didn't know what to say. So for so long I didn't know what to say, but perhaps there was something I could have said that would have put people at ease, and to say, hey, look, I fucked up. I'm trying to figure it out. And that could have been a greater integrity move. I've lost my cool at times, and integrity move, the accountability move, when you lose your cool, is say, hey, look, I'm getting upset. I need to go take a walk and come back to this conversation. And I haven't always had the presence of mind to do that. But yeah, I am doing my best. And I really value the opportunity to contribute to the community and to come to the table and to help people and to reduce people's suffering and help people feel less alone. That's really valuable to me. And so that's why this is so important, right? I could have walked away and said, okay, forget you guys. But that's not the integrity move, right? I have something to offer. And yeah, it cost me having some really tough conversations with myself and ultimately with the community. And so that's why I wanted to show up here and have this conversation and really own up to the fact that I haven't been perfect, but I am committed to listening and understanding and growing. And I think that's what's really important.
You had said briefly, just for a second, because I want to emphasize this part, is that the realistic part of it is not, this isn't an on and off switch, right? The measure of success in healing and growing in these measures is time frame, right? The ability to say, I need to step away in and of itself is a big step forward, right? I need to step away from this conversation because I'm angry and I need to collect myself. That is growth. We're going to have emotions. And sometimes we aren't going to be able to maintain that wall. The dam's going to break. What we do after that is what matters. And that's what this part is, this process is shortening the time of that overflow of emotion or response, getting your ground back under you, adjusting, apologizing, and making sure that you do your best to not do it again. It's not like you're looking to make an apology and just use that apology as an excuse to repeat. But
it won't be my last apology, ladies and gentlemen.
But it's to be realistic about it. Like we're human beings.
Yeah.
And you, like you said, you have a lot, you are committed to the community. You're committed to listening. You're committed to education and understanding and doing better for yourself. You're here, right? And just like myself, you're human and we're fallible. And you have no ill intention behind your actions. Like I've seen you hold space, I've seen you teach, I've witnessed a lot of your positives and I've seen some of your crashes, right? So I see you in your full breadth of a human, and I really appreciate it, because what ended up coming next was the accountability pod and feedback form.
Yeah, so in order to have a better understanding of the impact of these actions, I really needed to pull some people in, right? You're a member, Mr. Motts is a member who runs some munches, and also Kieran Hound is a member who was a leather pup title holder. And it was really important for me to understand what's a genuine alarm, right? And what is noise, what is projection, what is people being reactive instead of responding, right? So that was really helpful to bear that out and to get clear on what it is I wanted to do. And I think the other component of that is that there are people who had an issue with my behavior and there was no one for them to go to. There was no place for them to talk to my boss, right? Because I'm independent here. And the accountability pod can act like my boss in that way. It can be somebody that people can go to and address concerns that they have without having to talk to me directly, right? And I can understand why that would be terrifying, right? To say, hey, this person hurt me is easier than to say, hey, you hurt me, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I was blown away by this idea, this creation of yours. I'm sure there's variations of it out there somewhere, and maybe you aren't the sole proprietor of the accountability pod, but the way you introduced it with this feedback form was mind blowing to me, and it's actually something that I want to implement, because it's to have someone to be accountable to, who you trust and respect, and who trusts and respects you, so that you hear what is being said. That's like a genius move. And how's it working out so far?
It's yet to be introduced. So I wanted to introduce the feedback form with the message so that it's not just this click the link. If you've had an experience where you felt like I violated this sacred space of sex education, if you felt like I said something I should not have, if you felt like I upset you or I personally wronged you or I somehow was not serving the community. I genuinely want to know. I really do want to hear about it. And this form is a way that you can submit that without having to interact with me directly. And the idea is that the form goes to the accountability pod, right? So somebody can stay either anonymous or they can put their contact info down and request to be followed up with. Not that I can necessarily guarantee everybody's going to get followed up with. If there's an opportunity for repair or, some kind of restorative justice, I'm open to that. And I want to make sure that there's a pathway for that. My accountability pod members will receive the feedback forms that are filled out, and then they will look at them and then bring them to my attention as is appropriate, so that people can feel safe in their anonymity. They can be anonymous to the accountability pod, or they could, if they put their contact information down and say, hey, look, I don't want this to be, I don't want Ezra to know I'm part of this conversation, that's perfectly acceptable too. And that way they can follow up with that person, but I'm still left in the dark as to who specifically this is, if they're afraid of retaliation or escalation or something like that.
I want to throw something in here, and then we'll keep going. Restorative and transformative justice, right? Because you are transforming in this, and some of it is restorative, to restore that commitment, that integrity, that connection to community, where you are that person they can come to, where people can see this message and understand that you are evolving, and that while there's rumors that are out there that float around, there's nothing you can do about that, but aside from being yourself and showing the work that you're doing to be the best version of yourself that you can. Right. So what other steps are you taking for your own transformation, for your own healing, and restoring your identity back to where you believe it belongs?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some personal work that's going on. I'm researching things about anti-racism and how to show up in a way that is the least possible harmful. I used to host parties, and I'm taking a break from hosting parties. I'm honestly not sure if I'm ever going to come back to it, but certainly for the foreseeable future, that's not on the agenda. I am taking a break from community events. I haven't been to a party in almost 6 months now, which feels really weird. There was a time I was going to a party on a Friday night and a Saturday night, or I would go to two different parties on a Saturday night. So that's a big change for me. But I think it was really important for me to do that transformational work outside of the community and to come back when I feel ready. I also stepped down from the director of education position at Sanctuary LAX Studios. It just didn't feel right to continue there, given what was going on. So I've stepped away from that indefinitely. I also have a 90-day rule for partners, new partnerships. So new partnerships take 90 days before they become intimate. And I think that's really valuable, because sometimes somebody can come in hot and you don't know if it's because there's just some natural attraction or because they're like attracted to the position that you're in. And that's a risk that happens when you're in a position of authority, right? And that's not the reason I want to get into relationships. That's not the dynamic I'm trying to create. I think 90 days is a sufficient amount of time to suss that out.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Before we got on the call, we were discussing who you are, Ezra, as a human being, and then who you are within the lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a tough conversation to have. I think it's really important to have, but I think it adds context to what has made it difficult for me to show up, because my career as a BDSM educator, as a sex educator, as a writer really began as this Sir Ezra character. And I am more than that. I was always more than that. But this was a narrow slice that seemed to really serve me in the time, right? I was very visibly dominant. I was very masculine. I was very controlled, very tight. The idea that I would button the top button of my dress shirt was entirely a fabrication. That I never felt comfortable with a top button. You know what I mean? But that's that crisp, clean cut, dominant look, right? And then I'm a pandemic egg crack baby. I transitioned to non-binary over the pandemic. And so it became really difficult for me to show up as Sir Ezra. And I think a lot of the times when people are having issues, they're having issues with the character, right? Like they're not actually having issues with me because they don't know me. They just know this character that is being presented, right? And yeah, now that I'm non-binary, now that I'm more flexible in my dominance, it's really challenging to show up as Sir Ezra. It almost feels like I should have had this conversation in a tight three-piece suit with a tie on, because if as Sir Ezra got in trouble, Sir Ezra needs to apologize. But that's not how I want to show up. It's inauthentic now. It doesn't feel I can play the role, but it's not who I am anymore, right?
Yeah. And what's beautiful about this is that when you realize it, it's like it's never over, right? This process is going to continue, and you're going to continue evolving. You're
Yeah.
going to continue learning where you need to pay attention to. Things will continue reframing. And I just want to say thank you for your work in steering yourself in the direction that you believe is the truth for you and for your intentions and for your commitment.
Yeah, I would love to say that, yeah, okay, I did the transformation, I did all the healing, I'm done, now I'm perfect. But that would be bullshit. And I think there are people who are willing to say that too, but they're not in integrity, right? They're not in accountability in that moment. And the accountability move is to say, look, I am still learning, I am still growing, I am still healing, and I'm sorry for having hurt anybody along the way. Sincerely, if I can do that emotional labor of hearing your hurt, reach out. I will do it. I want to hold that space, and I want to hear how my words have hurt, because understanding the impact that they have had is going to help me to know that better and to avoid it in the future, right?
Yeah. And it's give yourself permission and forgiveness to say, for a lot of it, you didn't know better. I didn't know better. And now I know, and I'm making the changes.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank you so much, Ezra. You know what I want to do? I would like you to read that letter. Read
Okay.
the
What?
letter. It says a lot about character, right? I'm thankful that you were able to speak your piece here, because that to have a place to speak your story, your hurts, is very rare. Thank you for sharing that. And ultimately, I believe things do shake out the way they will. And you have learned from this process greatly.
Yeah. No, I believe in destiny, right? And I believe that everything happens exactly the way it needs to happen. And yeah, sometimes it's messy, but all you can do is learn your lessons.
Yes.
And so there really aren't any missteps. There are steps I would rather have taken differently, absolutely. But that was what I needed to do to get to where I am today.
And to see where you stand with it all.
Yeah.
Share your letter.
If you insist, time to be Mr. Roboto. I'd like to take some time today to talk about accountability. For me, accountability is being responsible for one's actions and having one's actions match one's values and beliefs. It also exists as a kind of condition. I am in accountability when my actions match my values and beliefs, and I'm out of accountability when they don't. I haven't always been in accountability. I now understand that some jokes I have made have been in poor taste and were inappropriate. There were times where I made jokes that were not in alignment with my values of kindness, compassion, thoughtfulness, and peace. They had a very real potential to do harm to others and violated the sacred space of sex education. When I was out of accountability and people called me in and called me out, I did not know how to respond. I saw them as personal attacks instead of an opportunity to grow from feedback. My first instinct was often to shut down and hide. I am sorry for the harm that my words have caused and that staying silent has made things worse. I am committed to listening and understanding and doing better moving forward. As part of the process, I have engaged an accountability pod. This accountability pod is a group of people who care about me and our community. They are willing to help me look at difficult situations I put myself in. Their job is not to defend me or to keep me accountable, but instead to help me keep myself accountable. Their job is to help me understand the consequences of my actions and move forward in a way that does the least harm. Their job also is to field feedback from people who take issue with my actions or behavior and would rather not address me directly. To that end, I have provided a feedback form. Responses to that form will go directly to my accountability pod members. I will not see the submissions, but the content will be communicated to me through my accountability pod. You can remain anonymous or add contact info for following up. The members of the accountability pod are known as Sister Joshua, Mr. Motts, and Kieran Hound. I would ask that unless you already have a personal relationship with them, please use the feedback form to connect with them and voice your feedback or concerns while being mindful of their time and energy. Other steps I have taken to reduce the potential for harm include stepping down as Director of Education at Sanctuary LAX Studios and taking a pause from hosting parties and attending community events. Additionally, I am maintaining a 90-day rule for any new partnerships. I wish I could tell you this process is over and I have healed and grown as much as I need to. However, that would simply not be true. I'm still learning, I'm still growing, and I'm still healing. I'm truly grateful for this opportunity to grow and find ways to better serve the community. If I have left you feeling hurt, confused, or ignored, I would like to apologize, and I would like to encourage you to use the form to deliver any comments or feedback you might have. Lastly, I want to thank you for your patience, understanding, and support as I navigate this challenging process.
Awesome. Thank you so much for reading that.
Yeah, and thank you for being part of the accountability pod and for making time for me today to have this conversation.
No, it's been a pleasure and an honor, and I hope for those seeing this can really feel and understand what this process has been like for you and your intentions of reconciliation and healing.
Yeah, and I want to thank people for listening. I know not everybody's going to want to hear this, and even for the people who do hear it, I know for some people nothing's ever going to be enough, right? Mm-hmm. But if you feel like what I have done and I'm doing isn't enough, put it in a form. Let me know and allow me to adjust.
Beautiful. Much respect, Ezra. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Oh,
I'll do my best.
Today's my birthday.
Happy birthday. I didn't know that. Happy birthday. 25, right?
26. Seriously, thank you so much for this, and I'm really proud of you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Tio.